The cafeteria fell silent as Mrs. Thornberry's voice cut through the air like a knife. Everyone, step back. Don't let that filthy boy near the food. 12-year-old Marcus Chen froze mid-reach, his trembling hand hovering over a tray of sandwiches. Around him, 200 students turned to stare. Some gasped, others snickered. A few pulled out their phones. Marcus's worn sneakers held together with duct tape seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. His jeans, clean but faded from countless washes, hung loose on his thin frame. The backpack slung over his shoulder was patched with fabric his father had salvaged from old mop heads. Mrs. Thornberry, I just wanted, Marcus began, his voice barely a whisper. I know what you wanted, the cafeteria supervisor sneered. Her face twisted with disgust. She was a large woman who wore her authority like armor, as she'd been waiting for this moment all semester. You wanted to contaminate the lunch line with whatever germs you brought from that janitor's closet. You call home. A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt his cheeks burn. My dad keeps the whole school clean, Marcus said quietly, but his voice cracked. We're not dirty. Oh, really? Mrs. Thornberry grabbed his wrist and held it up for everyone to see. Look at these fingernails. Look at this child. Do you know where his father sleeps? In the basement, like a rat. And you want to touch food that decent children will eat? The laughter grew louder. Someone yelled, Janitor Jr., and it caught on like wildfire. Within seconds, the entire cafeteria was chanting it, Janitor Jr., Janitor Jr., Janitor Jr. Marcus's eyes welled with tears, but he refused to let them fall. He'd learned long ago that tears only made things worse. He pulled his hand back and stepped away from the lunch line. That's right. Go back where you belong, Mrs. Thornberry said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe your father can sweep up some scraps for you. Marcus turned and walked toward the exit, each step feeling like a mile. Behind him, the chanting continued, mixed with cruel laughter and the clicking of camera phones. By tomorrow, he knew, the video would be everywhere. But what none of them knew, what none of them could possibly know, was that someone had been watching. From the cafeteria doorway, someone whose presence would change everything. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat alone in the school's empty library, his stomach growling. He'd learned to hide here during lunch, surrounded by books that offered an escape from his reality. Today, though, even his favorite corner felt cold. The library door swung open, and Marcus's heart sank. It was Vanessa Hartford, daughter of billionaire tech mogul Richard Hartford, flanked by her usual entourage of perfectly dressed students. Oh my God, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. The Janitor Jr. actually reads? I thought your kind just knew how to push brooms. Her friends giggled. Marcus kept his eyes on his book, a worn copy of Oliver Twist he found in a donation bin. I'm talking to you, poverty case, Vanessa snapped, striding over and slapping the book out of his hands. It skittered across the floor. Do you know who I am? Yes, Marcus said softly, retrieving his book. You're Vanessa Hartford. That's right. My father donated this entire library wing. That means I own it, which means I can kick you out whenever I want. She leaned down, her designer perfume overwhelming. So why don't you crawl back to whatever hole you came from? The library is for all students, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Did you just talk back to me? Before Marcus could respond, she grabbed his backpack and dumped it on the floor. Notebooks, pencils, and carefully saved homework scattered everywhere. But what caught everyone's attention was a small, leather-bound journal that fell open to reveal pages of complex mathematical equations. What the hell is this? Vanessa picked up the journal, squinting at the formulas. Did you steal this from someone? No, it's mine, Marcus said, reaching for it. Vanessa held it out of reach, showing it to her friends. Look at this. The janitor's kid thinks he's Einstein. These are probably just random numbers he copied from somewhere. Those are solutions to, Marcus started, but Vanessa cut him off. To what? How to calculate the best way to mop a floor. She laughed cruelly. You're pathetic. You know that? You'll never be anything more than your father, and nobody who cleans up after real people. She tossed the journal in a trash can and walked away, her friends following like obedient puppies. Their laughter echoed through the library long after they left. Marcus waited until they were gone, then quietly retrieved his journal from the trash. His hands shook as he wiped off a coffee stain from the cover. Inside were months of work equations he'd been developing for a theoretical algorithm that could revolutionize data compression. Not that anyone would ever care. He gathered his belongings and checked the clock. In 15 minutes, his father would finish his lunch break, and Marcus always visited him. It was the only good part of his day. Marcus found his father in the basement maintenance room, eating a simple sandwich and reading the newspaper. Mr. Chen looked up and smiled when his son entered, but the smile faded when he saw Marcus's red-rimmed eyes. "Marcus," his father said gently, setting down his food. "What happened?" "Nothing, Dad. Just the usual double quotes." Mr. Chen pulled his son into a hug. At 45, he still had the strong arms of someone who worked physical labor his entire life, but his eyes held a deep sadness that never quite went away. "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry you have to go through this." "It's not your fault," Marcus said, pulling back and forcing a smile. "Besides, I've been working on the algorithm. I think I'm close to a breakthrough." His father's expression shifted to one of pride mixed with concern. "Marcus, you know I believe in you, but these equations you're working on, they're college level, graduate level, even. Where did you learn all this?" Marcus shrugged. "Books, online courses, YouTube. The internet is free at the library." What he didn't mention was the hours he spent each night after his father fell asleep, studying by flashlight in their tiny basement apartment, or how he taught himself advanced calculus at age 9, or how he'd once hacked into the school's grading system not to change grades, but to fix a security flaw he discovered. He'd reported it anonymously, and the school had strengthened their cybersecurity without ever knowing who'd helped them. "You're special, Marcus," his father said quietly. "One day, everyone will see it." "Yeah," Marcus replied, not believing it for a second. A knock on the door interrupted them. Mr. Chen opened it to find Principal Westbrook, a stern woman in her 50s who ran Lexington Academy with an iron fist. "Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you about your son's behavior." Marcus's stomach dropped. His father's face went pale. "What did he do?" Mr. Chen asked. "He caused a disturbance in the cafeteria today." Mrs. Thornberry reported that he tried to skip the lunch line and became belligerent when corrected. "That's not what happened," Marcus protested. "Young man, I don't recall asking for your input," Principal Westbrook said coldly. Several students have confirmed Mrs. Thornberry's account. Additionally, Vanessa Hartford reported that Marcus destroyed library property and used threatening language toward her. "That's a lie." Marcus's voice cracked. "I didn't do any of that." Principal Westbrook ignored him, addressing his father instead. "Mr. Chen, I've been lenient about allowing your son to attend this school due to your employment here. But Lexington Academy has standards. We cannot have students who disturb the learning environment." "Please," Mr. Chen said, his voice breaking. "Marcus is a good boy. He's never been in trouble before. Whatever happened, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. The evidence is clear." Principal Westbrook replied, "Marcus is suspended for 3 days, effective immediately. And Mr. Chen, if this happens again, we'll have to reconsider both his enrollment and your employment." With that, she turned and left, her heels clicking authoritatively down the hallway. Marcus and his father stood in stunned silence. Everything was falling apart, and there was nothing they could do about it. They were powerless against the machine of wealth and influence that ran Lexington Academy. But what neither of them knew was that in Principal Westbrook's office, a visitor had been waiting. A visitor who had seen everything that happened in the cafeteria. A visitor whose presence at the school was no accident. The next morning, Marcus wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or humiliated about his suspension. At least he wouldn't have to face his classmates. At least he wouldn't have to hear the whispers and laughter. He spent the day in the public library, working on his algorithm. The equations were coming together beautifully, each variable clicking into place like a puzzle. If he was right and his calculations suggested this could compress data at rates that current technology couldn't match, tech companies would pay millions for something like this. But who would listen to a 12-year-old janitor's son? By evening, Marcus had filled another 20 pages of his journal with formulas. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice the man who sat down across from him until he spoke. "Those are impressive calculations." Marcus looked up, startled. The man was in his 60s, with steel gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore an expensive suit, but carried himself with an unpretentious air. Something about him seemed familiar, but Marcus couldn't place it. "Thank you," Marcus said cautiously, closing his journal. "Don't stop on my account." The man said with a kind smile. I'm curious about your compression ratio theorem. The way you've approached the logarithmic scale is quite innovative. Marcus's eyes widened. You understood that? I have some background in mathematics, the man said modestly. May I ask what you're working on? Normally, Marcus would never share his work with a stranger, but something about this man's genuine interest made him open up. Before he knew it, he was explaining his entire algorithm, sketching diagrams on scratch paper, his words tumbling out in an excited rush. The man listened intently, occasionally asking questions. That showed he truly understood the complexity of what Marcus was attempting. This is remarkable work, the man said when Marcus finally paused for breath. How old are you, son? 12, Marcus admitted, waiting for the inevitable disbelief. But the man just nodded. And where did you learn to think like this? Marcus shrugged. Books, mostly. And I like solving problems. You remind me of someone, the man said thoughtfully. Someone who also saw things differently than everyone else. Who also faced people who couldn't see his value. Who? Marcus asked. Myself, when I was your age. The man extended his hand. My name is Thomas Reynolds. Marcus shook his hand, still not recognizing the name. Marcus, I'd like to help you, Thomas said. But first, I need you to tell me about your school. About what happened in the cafeteria yesterday. Marcus froze. How did you know about that? Because I was there, Thomas said gently. I saw everything. Over the next hour, Marcus told Thomas everything. About the daily humiliations, about Vanessa Hartford and Mrs. Thornberry, about his father's struggles to provide for him, about Principal Westbrook's threats. He told this stranger things he'd never told anyone, and the relief of finally being heard was overwhelming. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Marcus, Thomas said when the boy finally fell silent, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Marcus nodded slowly. Good. Tomorrow, I want you to come to school with your father, even though you're suspended. Can you do that? Why? Because tomorrow, things are going to change. Thomas stood up, pulling out a business card. If anyone tries to stop you, show them this and tell them to call me. Marcus looked at the card. It read, Judge Thomas Reynolds, District Court. You're a judge. Marcus whispered, I am. And tomorrow, we're going to have a very interesting school assembly. Thomas smiled, but there was steel in his eyes. Get some rest, Marcus. Tomorrow, Justice comes to Lexington Academy. The next morning, Marcus and his father arrived at school to find an unusual number of cars in the parking lot. Expensive cars, official-looking cars, and news vans. What's going on? Mr. Chen asked nervously. I don't know, Dad, Marcus lied, clutching Judge Reynolds' card in his pocket. When they entered the building, they were immediately intercepted by Principal Westbrook. Her face pale and strained. Double quotes Mr. Chen. Marcus shouldn't be here. He's suspended. We're here to see Judge Reynolds, Marcus said quietly, holding up the card. Principal Westbrook's eyes went wide. You know the judge. He's waiting for us, Marcus replied with more confidence than he felt. They were escorted to the auditorium, which was filling with students, teachers, and several well-dressed people Marcus didn't recognize. On stage sat Judge Reynolds, along with what appeared to be lawyers and school board members. Vanessa Hartford sat in the front row with her father. Looking confused and irritated, Mrs. Thornberry stood off to the side, her earlier confidence replaced with visible nervousness. Judge Reynolds spotted Marcus and gestured for him and his father to sit in reserved seats near the front. As they sat down, whispers erupted throughout the auditorium. Isn't that Janitor Jr.? What's he doing here? Why is there a judge? Principal Westbrook took the podium, her hands shaking slightly. Students and faculty, we have a very unusual situation today. Judge Thomas Reynolds has requested to address the school. This is highly irregular. Judge Reynolds stood and walked to the podium with calm authority. The room fell silent. Thank you, Principal Westbrook. I'll try to keep this brief, as I know everyone has classes to attend. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the auditorium. My name is Judge Thomas Reynolds. Some of you may know that I preside over district court cases. What you may not know is that I also serve on the board of directors. For the State Education Oversight Committee, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Principal Westbrook looked like she might faint. I came to Lexington Academy 2 days ago for a routine observation, Judge Reynolds continued. These observations are unannounced and confidential, designed to assess how schools treat all their students, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. He turned to look directly at Marcus. What I witnessed in your cafeteria was not only a violation of basic human dignity, but also multiple violations of state education codes and federal anti-discrimination laws. The auditorium erupted in shocked whispers. Mrs. Thornberry had gone white as a sheet. I watched the cafeteria supervisor publicly humiliate a 12-year-old child, Judge Reynolds said, his voice hardening. I watched her deny him access to food he was entitled to receive. I watched her make discriminatory statements about his family's economic status. At his father's honest profession, he pulled out his phone and held it up. I recorded the entire incident, and then I went to the library, where I witnessed another student, Vanessa Hartford, engage in bullying, destruction of personal property, and verbal assault. Vanessa jumped to her feet. That's not true. He's lying. Miss Hartford, sit down, her father hissed, his face red with embarrassment. I also recorded that incident. Judge Reynolds continued calmly. Both videos have been submitted to the school board and the state education department. But before we discuss the legal ramifications, I'd like to share something else. He gestured to Marcus. Marcus Chen, would you please come up here? Marcus's legs felt like jelly as he walked to the stage. 200 pairs of eyes followed him, but for once, he held his head high. Marcus, would you tell everyone what you've been working on? Judge Reynolds asked gently. Marcus's voice was quiet, but steady. I've been developing a data compression algorithm. It's a mathematical formula that can make file sizes smaller without losing information. And how long have you been working on this? About 8 months. Judge Reynolds turned to the audience. After meeting Marcus at the library yesterday, I sent his work to a friend of mine, Dr. Sarah Chen, head of computer science at MIT. Not only did she confirm that Marcus's algorithm is sound, but she believes it could be groundbreaking in the field of data storage. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. Students who mocked Marcus stared in disbelief. This 12-year-old boy, Judge Reynolds continued, who has been called Janitor Jr., who has been treated as less than by students and staff alike, is working at a level that most graduate students struggle to achieve. And he's been doing it while living in poverty, while facing daily discrimination, while watching his father work multiple jobs to keep him in this school. Judge Reynolds' voice grew stern. Lexington Academy claims to be an institution of excellence, but excellence is not determined by how you treat your wealthiest students. It's determined by how you treat your most vulnerable ones. Principal Westbrook stood up, her voice shaking. Judge Reynolds, I assure you that we had no idea. That's precisely the problem. Judge Reynolds interrupted. You had no idea because you never bothered to look. You never asked why a bright, quiet boy spent his lunches hiding in the library. You never questioned why he wore the same clothes every week, or why his backpack was held together with tape. You saw poverty and assumed incompetence. He turned to Mrs. Thornberry. As of this moment, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Your behavior was not only unprofessional, but criminal. Denying a child access to food based on socioeconomic status is a violation of federal law. Mrs. Thornberry opened her mouth to protest, but Judge Reynolds silenced her with a look. Miss Hartford, he addressed Vanessa, who had slumped down in her seat. Your behavior constitutes bullying, which this school claims to have zero tolerance for. You will face appropriate disciplinary action. Additionally, your father and I will be having a conversation about empathy and privilege. Richard Hartford nodded grimly, his hand firmly on his daughter's shoulder. But this isn't just about punishment, Judge Reynolds said, his tone softening. This is about learning, about growth, about becoming better. He looked out at the sea of students. How many of you laughed in the cafeteria? How many of you joined in the chanting? How many of you looked away when Marcus needed someone to stand up for him? Uncomfortable silence filled the auditorium. Several students looked down at their hands. I'm not telling you this to shame you, but to wake you up. Judge Reynolds continued. Every single person in this room has value. Every single person deserves respect. The janitor, who keeps your school clean, works harder than most of you ever will. His son, who has faced more obstacles than you can imagine, has achieved more than most adults achieve in a lifetime. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus, I have a proposal for you. Dr. Chen at MIT wants to meet you. She's also connected me with several organizations that provide scholarships for gifted students from underserved communities. With your permission, I'd like to help you apply." Marcus's eyes widened. "You mean I could go to a different school? Possibly. Or we could work to make Lexington Academy the school. It should be one that nurtures talent, regardless of where it comes from." Judge Reynolds turned to Principal Westbrook. "That decision is partly up to Principal Westbrook and the school board, who will need to implement significant changes to their policies and culture." Principal Westbrook nodded vigorously. "We will, Judge Reynolds. We absolutely will, Marcus," Judge Reynolds said. "The choice is ultimately yours. But know this, you have options now. You have support, and you have people who see your true worth." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of shame. His father stood up and pulled him into a tight hug, both of them crying openly. The auditorium remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. It was a teacher Marcus didn't know well. Then another person joined in, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on their feet, applauding. Some students were crying. Others looked ashamed. But everyone was clapping for the boy they called janitor. Everyone except Vanessa Hartford, who sat with her arms crossed, her father whispering urgently in her ear. Marcus Chen walked through the halls of Lexington Academy with his head held high. The cafeteria had a new supervisor, someone who greeted every student with warmth. Principal Westbrook had implemented a comprehensive anti-bullying program and required all staff to undergo training on unconscious bias, but the biggest change was in how students treated each other. Marcus still wore his patched jeans and taped sneakers. New clothes were expensive, and his father was saving for Marcus's college fund now. But no one mocked him anymore. In fact, several students had asked him to tutor them in math. He'd started a coding club that met after school, and 15 kids had joined. The data compression algorithm was being reviewed by a major tech company. If they decided to license it, Marcus and his father would finally have financial security. But even if they didn't, Dr. Chen had already offered Marcus a place in midsummer program for gifted young students. Vanessa Hartford had been required to do community service and attend counseling sessions about empathy and privilege. She'd apologized to Marcus, a stiff, uncomfortable apology that felt rehearsed, but it was a start. Her father had donated money to create a scholarship fund for children of school staff members. Most importantly, Mr. Chen no longer had to hide in the basement during his breaks. He ate lunch in the teacher's lounge now, where several faculty members had befriended him. They learned that he'd once been an engineer in China before immigrating to America, where his credentials weren't recognized. He was taking night classes to get race certified, and the school had promoted him to head of facilities management. On this particular afternoon, Marcus found his father fixing a broken water fountain. Mr. Chen smiled when he saw his son. "How was your day?" his father asked. "Good," Marcus replied. "I finished the practice problems for the mid-program. And guess what? The coding club wants to enter a national competition. That's wonderful, son. I'm so proud of you." "Dad," Marcus said seriously, "none of this would have happened if Judge Reynolds hadn't been there that day." "No," his father agreed. "But Marcus, the judge didn't create your talent. He didn't write your algorithms or teach you to code. He just gave you the opportunity to show the world what was already inside you." Marcus thought about that. Do you think I should write to him to say thank you? I think he'd like that very much." That evening, Marcus sat down to compose an email to Judge Reynolds. He wanted to express his gratitude, to share his progress, to tell the judge how much his intervention had meant. But as he typed, Marcus realized something important. Judge Reynolds hadn't just saved him, he'd taught him a lesson that would last a lifetime. Justice wasn't about wealth or power. It wasn't about having the fanciest clothes or the most influential parents. Justice was about seeing people for who they truly were, about standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, about using whatever privilege you had to lift others up. Marcus had been on the receiving end of that justice. Now it was his turn to pay it forward. He finished his email and pressed send. Then he opened a new document and began outlining a proposal for a free coding bootcamp for kids from low-income families. He didn't know if anyone would listen to a 12-year-old's idea, but Judge Reynolds had taught him that you had to try. The next morning, Marcus was surprised to receive a response from Judge Reynolds. It was brief but powerful. "Marcus, Your gratitude means the world to me. But you don't owe me thanks. You owe it to yourself to keep being exactly who you are, brilliant, kind, and resilient. And you owe it to the next kid who faces what you face to speak up for them. The way I spoke up for you, that's how we change the world, one act of courage at a time. I'm proud to know you. Tia Marcus read the email 3 times, then printed it out and pinned it to the wall above his desk in the basement apartment. It hung there next to his father's work schedule and a photo of his mother, who'd passed away when he was 5. As he got ready for school that day, Marcus looked at himself in the mirror. Same patched jeans, same taped sneakers, same face that had been mocked and ridiculed, but everything was different now. He was Marcus Chen, son of a janitor and a future engineer. He was Marcus Chen, developer of a potentially revolutionary algorithm. He was Marcus Chen, a 12-year-old boy who faced injustice and come out stronger. And most importantly, he was Marcus Chen, someone who would never forget what it felt like to be invisible and who would spend the rest of his life making sure no one else had to feel that way. At school that day, as Marcus walked past the cafeteria where he'd once been humiliated, he noticed a new student standing alone by the lunch line. The boy looked nervous, his clothes shabby, his backpack worn. Marcus walked over and smiled. "Hi, I'm Marcus. Want to sit with me and my friends?" The boy's face lit up with relief. "Really? You'd let me sit with you?" "Of course," Marcus said. Everyone deserves a place at the table. As they walked to get their lunch, Marcus thought about Judge Reynolds' words. That's how we change the world, one act of courage at a time. It wasn't always easy being brave. It wasn't always simple to stand up for others when the world tried to push them down. But Marcus had learned that justice wasn't something you waited for someone else to deliver. Justice was something you created, one kind act at a time. And in that moment, walking through the cafeteria with a new friend who needed exactly what he'd needed just 3 months ago, Marcus Chen understood the most important lesson of all. Everyone has the power to be someone's Judge Reynolds. You just have to choose to use it.